Hey, fourth grade. Today we're going to talk about rounding numbers. You've learned this skill before. You learned it in third grade. We're going to go over it again. We're going to use some bigger numbers this time, but it works the same way. So if you remember how to round from last year, it'll work the same exact way. We're just using some bigger numbers with it. So I'm on page 23 of your book. This is lesson 1.4, rounding numbers. I'm going to do this page and the next page with you, and then we'll talk about it in class tomorrow. During May 2008, the Mount Rushmore National Monument in South Dakota welcomed 138,202 visitors. A website reported that about 100,000 people visited the park during that month. Was the estimate reasonable? So when it's asking for is the estimate reasonable, does it mean that their rounding sounds like it could be true? Or is it just far off enough that it's probably not very reasonable? Remember, rounding is all about finding an estimate. An estimate tells you about how many or about how much. So it's the key word is about. A rounded number is not an exact number. It's just something that's close to it so that you can do some math with it without getting too far into the details. You can round a number to find an estimate. So we use rounding to do estimates. So let's say we were adding really big numbers together. If we rounded the numbers first, we can get a good idea of what it would be like to add them together easily. So then we know if our answer, when we actually do the adding, is correct. So we're going to practice rounding for a few days before we get into adding and subtracting. To round a number to the nearest 100,000, find the hundred thousands it's between. So they gave us this number right here. I'm going to look at the 100,000s place. This number falls somewhere between just plain 100,000 and 200,000 would be the next level up. So just looking at the 100,000s place, that would be rounding to the nearest 100,000. Use the number line to see which 100,000, 138,202 is closer to. So they actually draw the number line for you. We said it was between these two markers, the 100,000 marker and the 200,000 marker. So they put those on the timeline for you. They marked the halfway point, which halfway between it would be, this one's marked by 10,000s. So this is 110,000, 120,000, 130,000. So our number goes in there. 140,000. Right in the middle is 150,000. That middle number is going to help us figure out which is our number closest to. Which 100,000 is it closer to? Is it closer to regular 100,000 or is it closer to 200,000? And we can tell based on the number line, these guys are about this far apart. However, these guys are this far apart. So it's closer to the 100,000 than it is to the 200,000. So 138,202 is closer to 100,000 than it is to 200,000. So 100,000 is a reasonable estimate for 138,202 because that's what our question was asking us. Was their estimate reasonable? They said that this number is about 100,000 people. Well, doing the rounding, we're like, yeah, it's closer to 100,000 than it would be 200,000. So yeah, their estimate's pretty reasonable. What number is halfway between 100,000 and 200,000? We said that was 150,000. So we used that halfway marker to help us a little bit. So how does knowing where the halfway point is help you find which 100,000 is closer to? Knowing where that halfway point kind of helps us see where it is in comparison to the other two numbers. If we didn't have this halfway point, it's kind of hard to tell which one goes which. I'm going to cover it up. So it's kind of hard to tell how far it is from each one, but the halfway point, if we know it's smaller than the halfway point, which means it is closer to the first one. If it was bigger than the halfway point, it would be closer to the other one. So that halfway marker kind of helps us judge, is it closer to this one or this one? All right, turn the page. All right. So it says Mount Rushmore is located 5,725 feet above sea level. About how high is Mount Rushmore above sea level to the nearest 1,000 feet? So here's our key words. It says about, which tells me we're going to estimate. If it said, it didn't say about, if it just said like exactly how much is it, or if it just asked for how much, it's going to want an exact number. But because it says the word about, I know I'm going to be estimating. And estimating to the nearest thousands place. So they put the number down for us. To round a number to the nearest thousand, find the thousands it's between. It's the same thing as the other one, except for the other one we were rounding to the nearest 100,000. This one we're rounding to the nearest thousand. The cool thing about rounding though is that it works the same way regardless of which place value they tell you to use. If they want you to use the tens place, it works the same way. If they want you to use the ones place or the hundreds place or something like that, rounding works the same exact way, depending on, doesn't matter which place value you use. So I know that this number is somewhere in between 5,000 and 6,000. But the question is, which one is it closer to? Because we're rounding to the nearest thousands place, we got to figure out, does that mean it's closer to a plain old 5,000 or closer to 6,000, which is the next level up? Look at the digit in the place value position to the right. So this is where, instead of using a number line, this is kind of the trick that we're going to be sticking with here. We actually use the neighbor number to help us. So if we're rounding to the nearest thousands place, I'm going to use what I like to call the neighbor number. It's whatever number is right to the right of that number, not to the left, the other side, but to the right of it. The next immediate place value to the right. That number will tell us what to do. If it's 5 or more, round up. If it's less than 5, stay the same. Okay? So with this one, the 7 is larger than 5, which means I'm going to go with the round up version. I'm going to go with the 6,000 because that's rounding the place value that it's asking for. So this one is 5 or more, like I said. So we're going to round up. We're going to go to the next thousands place up. So that neighbor number can help you do this without using a number line, which is pretty cool. I'll do some more of those with you. So I'm going to round to the place value of the underlined digit with these guys down here. I'm going to do a couple and then I'm going to talk to you about something. So we have 64,999. We're going to round it to the 10,000s place, which means I got to look at the neighbor number 4. Since the 4 is less than 5, it's going to stay the same, which means I'm going to keep the 6 the same. Oops. Keep the 6 the same, turn the rest to zeros. Because we're trying to see, is this 64,999 closer to 60,000, because we're doing the 10,000s place, or is it closer to 70,000? Well, because the 4 is less than 5, which means it's less than the halfway point. If it were 5 or more, it would be at the halfway point or bigger, which would make it closer to the bigger version. Because the 4 is less than 5, that means it makes it closer to the smaller one. So that's why we stick with 60,000. With this one, we're doing to the nearest thousands place. So I'm trying to see, is it closer to 301,000 or is it closer to 302,000? So I'm going to look at the neighbor number. The neighbor number is a 5, which means it's at the halfway point between those two numbers, which makes it closer to the bigger one. So even if it's exactly halfway, we still round up. 850,000, we're trying to figure out if it's closer to 800,000, because we're looking at the 100,000s place, or is it closer to the next one up, which is the 900,000? So I look the 8 and then I look at the neighbor number. The neighbor number is a 5. 5 is greater, or well, 5 or more, round up. So it's at that halfway point again as well. So we're going to go to the bigger number because we need to round up. Then we're going to look at the 1,000s place in this one. So I'm going to figure out, is it closer to 10,000 or the next thousands place up, which is 11,000. We look at my neighbor number. Neighbor number is an 8, which is definitely bigger than halfway, bigger than 5, which means I have to go with the bigger one. So tomorrow we'll practice this a little bit more, but basically what you're trying to figure out is whatever place value it tells you to round to, whether it's underlined or it tells you in words, you have to figure out if that number is closer to the place value that's above it or that is smaller than it, like this one is smaller, is 60,000, or are you trying to figure out, is it closer to the bigger place value above it? And then you can use that neighbor number to help you, because that neighbor number will tell you, are you smaller than halfway between them, or are you bigger than halfway in between them? And that can help you make your answer. So we'll go over this again later in class, and we'll do some more practice then. I'll see you there.